I arrived at the Green School 10 years ago, when I was 7 years old. I had just moved to Bali from Singapore, and while I can't really remember what those first few months at Green School were like, all my mom tells me is that I turned feral. 10 years later, there are 3 things I've been consistently known for: having long curly hair, being distracted during class, and always asking questions. I feel I have been asking questions forever. All kinds of questions. Useful questions, silly questions, distracting questions, you name it. You know the way a toddler asks the question why over and over again? I still love asking why and the journey of discovery it takes me on. I ask questions everywhere, to Google, to my friends, to my parents sometimes, and of course at school, to my teachers. Usually my questions are appreciated by the teacher, and I even feel it enriches the experience for the other students. But sometimes teachers have kindly, or not so kindly, asked me to stop asking questions, either because this is the 5th question I've asked in the past 5 minutes, or because they need to get on with class. There have been 1 or 2 times where my questions have been shut down, and I was left feeling humiliated. You can bet that I didn't ask any questions in those classes again, and I ended up learning nothing, I hated being there, and I bombed the class. Being the curious guy I am, when I entered high school and discovered that there was a class called LEAP, where I could literally ask any question I wanted and then try to answer it through research or a project, I was so excited. LEAP stands for Let's Eat Amazing Pizza. It sounds kind of random, partly because it was created by a LEAP student, but it reflects our personality of just going for it and having fun as we learn. Thankfully, our LEAP teacher, Mo, prefers this one over the very boring original acronym: Lean, Entrepreneurial, Action-Based, and Product-Oriented. Even though we have a lot of freedom in LEAP, there is structure that fosters our curiosity, and it starts with a pitch. We are pitched ideas from the community and from each other, and then, through our project autopsy process, where we dissect each idea through a set of questions, we are able to decide what we want to focus on. Then, we work on our project all day, every day, for 6 full weeks. For example, the focus of my first LEAP was the ocean. We started with a broad question of what do we want to learn about the ocean? The answer? Marine life, which took us to the beach, where we snorkeled and came back with footage of an octopus, giving us plenty to research and learn about. We agreed that snorkeling didn't allow us enough time underwater, which led to us sticking our heads in bowls of water to see how long we could hold our breath, before eventually signing up for a freediving course. With our freediving qualification and marine life knowledge, we then asked ourselves, how can we put this to good use? The answer? Creating artificial reefs in North Bali to encourage coral growth and marine life. That is just one example of what can happen through LEAP, and I have gained so many new interests and passions for things I never knew I was interested in. My favorite part of being in LEAP is being able to ask all sorts of questions. I love that sometimes a simple question like, can we go catch ants now, can lead to a 3-week journey of finding alternative and sustainable food sources. But asking a question like, should I drink from this old bottle of sparkling water, can lead to me choking for 2 minutes. And although it wasn't the smartest thing to do, I still learned something. LEAP is a self-led experience, where we have the freedom to experiment and be curious, with no fear of grades. And even though we do have a teacher, they are more like a project facilitator, who learns with us instead of teaching us. Over the past 3 years, I've participated in LEAP 8 times. Each block lasts 6 weeks, which is great, because as a team, we have to stay motivated and productive, while communicating and solving problems creatively. It was important to make the most of our time with each project in order to succeed. I feel that all these life skills will be incredibly useful in any of my future professions and relationships. But most importantly, my LEAP experience has grown my confidence to the point where I can be thrown into any team project and apply myself effectively. It's made me realize that my curiosity is a superpower. When it finally came to Greenstone, I was excited to be able to take these skills and focus on a project that I could really sink my teeth into for a whole year. I knew it had to be something I was curious about to keep me interested and motivated. My first idea was to customize a van, but then I lost motivation. My second idea was to build a sustainable building, but I soon lost my motivation. My third idea was to build a pool for the school. While I did get the furthest on this project, I did start to lose motivation again, until PacMo gave me a friendly push in the right direction, and I was able to start making connections and ended up with a pool squad of helpers. At this moment, my motivation for the project came back, and it's when I realized that I'm pretty great at managing a project and working hard on it, but only if I have a team working with me. I hadn't anticipated that working solo would be my least favorite part about Greenstone. If there's one thing LEAP has taught me, it's that completing milestones and having success as a community is much more rewarding than on your own. So, my pool project was finally getting somewhere, but then thanks to coronavirus, school shut down. After a week, I realized that my project wasn't possible anymore and I had to start from scratch again. To be honest, I was disappointed that my project couldn't continue, but I feel that through LEAP, where I had experienced projects failing in the past, I now had the skills to quickly reevaluate, adapt, and bounce back when necessary. By March, I had spent 2 LEAP blocks studying fermentation. The first block, we looked at sustainable and alternative foods, where we ended up making lots of different cheeses. And in the second block, we looked at ethanol-based biofuels by fermenting different biomasses and even tried making our own mead. So, as I was considering what to do for my next Greenstone, it occurred to me I had only scratched the surface of fermentation, and I still had tons of questions that I was curious to find the answers to. It seemed like the perfect project for me, and it would be easy to work on from home. When I told Ibu Harriet and PacMo of my decision, they thought it was a great idea, but I think they were definitely sold when I told them I was going to name it FerminChaytion. So I had my idea, and I was excited to see where it would take me. I had no clue how many things could be fermented, and wasn't quite sure where to start, until PacMo, my ferment sensei, once again put me on my path by sending me a bunch of recipes on what I could ferment. For people who aren't familiar with what it is, fermentation began as the way food was preserved and stored before refrigeration came along. It is the metabolic process of turning carbohydrates into alcohol and lactic acid. So that means starch and sugars are chemically broken down by yeast and bacteria and produce either lactic acid or alcohol and carbon dioxide. Simply put, yeast eats carbs and produces alcohol and CO2, which is just bubbles, and bacteria eats carbs and produces lactic acid, which gives that sour or tangy taste in a lot of fermented foods. Many of the foods and drinks we consume today are in fact fermented and come from all around the world. Things like kombucha, yogurt, cheese, kimchi, Tabasco, and tempeh. Every region of the world has their own form of fermentation. I knew how fermentation worked, but I didn't know where it came from, so I decided to look into the history. And what better place to start than with something I was already making, mead. Mead is mainly made from honey, and it's the oldest alcoholic beverage on the planet. Traces of it were found in 9,000-year-old pottery jars in northern China, but it is referenced in many ancient cultures. The Greek god of wine, Bacchus, was the god of mead long before wine. In Norse mythology, mead provided the gift of poetry and composition. Even the term honeymoon comes from newlyweds drinking mead to get a little more comfortable with each other after their wedding. There is so much history just on one drink, and I discovered so much more about the whole world of fermentation. I was so curious and engrossed with the history that I hadn't even thought about the health benefits. Fermented foods are full of microorganisms, bacteria, and yeast, otherwise known as probiotics. Once again, my curiosity was sparked. I didn't know that much about gut health, but I definitely didn't know that our gut contains trillions of bacteria, viruses, and fungi. Having an immune system full of diverse and healthy bacteria, which fermented foods can provide, is so crucial to protect ourselves from harmful pathogens. And at a time like this, with COVID, I believe that it is so important to keep curious about our body to remain healthy and in balance. So I was learning a lot on my own, which was great, but as I mentioned before, the thing that really keeps me motivated long-term is working with a team. But because I couldn't really see anyone due to COVID, I needed to find an online community for myself. I joined 2 parent group chats on fermentation and sourdough, which was great. I was even talking to fellow classmates about it because they had questions about fermentation. But most importantly, I had my mentor PacMo. who I continued to direct my curiosity at. And to be fair, sometimes I could have figured it out on my own, sure. But being able to share what I had done and ask questions to people who share my interest made the whole process all the more enjoyable and interesting. I've spent the past 2 months testing and trying different fermented foods and drinks. And here I'd like to show you some of the stuff I've done. This whole project started because I was still curious about something I did in class, and my curiosity continued to drive me to keep discovering new things. Although learning about fermentation was a fantastic experience and it was one of the best projects I've ever worked on, I feel I could have done this Greenstone with any project. Let me explain. The thing that motivated me through this project wasn't a lifelong passion for fermentation, although I think I may have acquired one now, but it was just something else that ignited my curiosity. It could have been about glass making, gardening, or freediving. It didn't matter. The important thing is that I was curious about it and I wanted to learn more. Now, not everyone is like me, and there's a reason why many feel shy to ask a question in front of a room. The truth is that standard education does a horrible job at fostering children's curiosity, with too much focus on content-driven curriculums and having correct answers. By the time kids are in primary school, more often than not, their curiosity has been extinguished. And yet, research shows that curiosity is one of the strongest markers for academic success. The effect of squashing curiosity is that people tend to simply accept what is told to them, denying them the ability to cultivate their own opinions and the opportunity to learn to love learning. Not to mention the countless number of adventures asking questions can take you on. I've been very lucky. My parents, the people around me, and my teachers have consistently expected and encouraged my curiosity to lead the way I learn. My fermentation journey is the culmination of 10 years at the Green School, where I have gathered millions of pieces of knowledge, all which, for serious love for learning, in a fun and warm environment, has fermented me into who I am today. Very much a hungry learner, forever grateful for eating all that amazing pizza. Thank you.